You ever have one of those memories that clings to your ribs no matter how many years pass, like a splinter that never quite works its way out? That's what the day I turned 18 feels like. Not my birthday, my eviction. My name's Caleb. I'm 28 now, and for the last decade, I've carried the kind of silence most people wouldn't understand. Not the peaceful, zen kind. I'm talking about the kind of silence that sits heavy in your chest, where once there was the sound of family, laughter, yelling, footsteps on stairs, even the clatter of dishes. Then one day, it just goes dead quiet. You don't call. You don't write. You don't go back. I didn't plan to vanish from my family's life. I didn't have some rebellious meltdown or storm off into the night after a screaming match. No, they made that decision for me, and did it with the kind of smug detachment you'd expect from someone throwing out leftovers. It was a Tuesday, if I remember right. My mom, Janice, had just gotten home from work and was already worked up because I hadn't done the dishes. Again, I was a senior in high school. Finals were that week. I'd pulled a double at the local grocery store the night before and passed out with my face in a stats textbook. But none of that mattered to her. She didn't ask if I'd eaten, didn't ask how school was. Just saw the dishes and snapped. "You're 18 now," she said, arms folded, eyes locked on me like she was daring me to talk back. "You need to start acting like a man. You want to live here, you follow my rules. You don't, the door's right there." I stood there blinking at her like a fool. Not because she hadn't said things like that before. She had, for years. But because this time, something in her voice told me it wasn't an empty threat. She meant it. And I guess part of me was so used to being the scapegoat in our house that I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, the storm would pass. It didn't. She came back 30 minutes later with my old camping backpack already stuffed with my things, half-folded shirts, a couple pairs of socks, a moldy notebook I'd forgotten existed. She tossed it at my feet like a bag of trash and said, "Figure it out yourself." No goodbye, no hug, not even a glance back as she shut the door behind me. That was the last time I saw my childhood home. To understand how we got there, though, you'd need to know a bit more about Janice. She's the kind of woman who always believed she was smarter than everyone else in the room. The kind of person who complains about entitled young people while living off credit cards and payday loans. Her version of motherhood was more managerial than maternal. She loved control. If you weren't useful, you were disposable. And unfortunately for her, I stopped being useful the moment I started thinking for myself. My dad, he left when I was 10, took off for Texas with some woman named Clarissa who made bath bombs for a living. We got a few postcards for the first couple years. Then nothing. Janice never forgave him for leaving, but somehow all of that resentment ended up aimed at me. "You look just like your father when you lie," she'd sneer. Same coward's eyes. For a long time, I believed that I was just a younger, more disappointing version of a man who'd already failed her once. I had a younger sister, too, Brianna. She was 16 when I left. We weren't close, not because I didn't want to be, but because Janice had this way of turning us against each other. She'd feed us little lies and half-truths, then sit back and watch the chaos unfold. "Brianna says you stole her tip money," she once told me. Even though I hadn't touched a cent, why would she lie? And that was the genius of it. She never yelled. She just planted seeds and watched them grow into weeds between us. After she kicked me out, I slept behind a 24-hour laundromat for a few nights. Then I couch-hopped. Got a job at a mechanic's shop because the manager felt sorry for me when I showed up reeking of detergent and desperation. I never told anyone what happened. Not really. Just said I left home. No one asked why. I scraped my way through life for a while. Slept in my car when I could afford one. Took night classes, eventually got certified as a diesel tech. 10 years of hard work, long nights, and the kind of lessons you only learn when you've got no safety net beneath you. And in all that time, not once did I hear from my mother. Not a text, not a birthday card, not even a forwarded message. But the silence gave me time. Time to grow, to build something. I didn't just survive, I got good at what I did. Eventually started my own small repair business. Nothing flashy, but steady. Honest work. Good reputation. After a while, I hired a couple guys. Then expanded. I got an apartment I didn't have to share with cockroaches. Bought a car that didn't rattle like a maraca. I kept my head down and moved forward. Then, last month, I got a call. I didn't recognize the number, but something in me told me to answer it anyway. "Caleb." The voice was cautious. Feminine. Familiar, but older. "It's Brianna." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. Just sat there in my office chair, gripping the edge of the desk like it might anchor me to the present. I wasn't sure if this was still your number, she continued. I got it from one of your old coworkers. I know it's been a long time, but we need help. That's when the ground under me started shifting again. She told me Janice was in trouble. Big trouble. Credit card debt, hospital bills, something about defaulting on a second mortgage she shouldn't have even been approved for. Apparently, she'd been using Brianna's name on loans too. The house was going into foreclosure. Collectors were circling like vultures. They didn't know where else to turn. We thought maybe, Brianna said quietly, you could help us out. Just a little. Maybe pay off a few things so Mom can get back on her feet. Just like that. 10 years of silence. 10 years of scraping by and building something out of nothing. And now they wanted a handout. I didn't answer right away. I think I just laughed. Not out of humor, but disbelief. Like the absurdity of it was so heavy, my body had to let it out somewhere or I'd explode. Caleb? She said again, this time a bit more hesitant. Are you still there? I was. But I wasn't the same kid who got tossed out with a backpack and a warning to figure it out. Not anymore. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. A quiet kind of resolve. Not rage. Not bitterness. Just a cold, clear recognition of the opportunity dangling in front of me. They wanted help. They were desperate. And for the first time in a decade, I had the power. So I asked Brianna to tell me everything. Every cent. Every lie. Every trick Janice had pulled to keep the debt hidden. I told her I'd think about it. But first, I wanted to hear it all. And as she spoke, voice trembling, shame seeping into every sentence, I started to form a plan. Not just to help. No. To make sure they understood exactly what it felt like to be discarded. To be treated like a burden. To finally, after all these years, get my turn at the wheel. But I didn't let any of that show. Not yet. Instead, I just said, all right, let me call you back in a few days. I'll see what I can do. Because the best revenge? It doesn't start with a scream. It starts with a smile. And a promise to see what I can do. It's strange, the things you remember when old wounds get ripped open. After Brianna called, I couldn't stop replaying moments I thought I'd buried. Like the time I was 13 and twisted my ankle walking home from school in the rain. I limped and soaked and muddy, barely able to put weight on it. Janice glanced up from the TV, took one look, and said, you're tracking dirt in the house. Go clean yourself up. I spent that night on the floor because she didn't want me bleeding on the couch cushions. She didn't take me to urgent care. Didn't even offer ice. But 2 weeks later, when Brianna sprained her wrist during a volleyball game, Janice left work early, brought flowers, and sat with her the entire hospital visit. I remember staring at the vase on Brianna's nightstand and wondering what it would take for someone to care about me like that. That was our dynamic for as long as I could remember. Brianna, the golden child. Me, the insurance policy that stopped being useful when I stopped being quiet. At first, I didn't blame Brianna for the way things were. She was 2 years younger, still figuring things out. But over time, she learned to play her role well. When Janice blamed me for things that weren't my fault, Brianna stayed silent. When Janice would hand her money for clothes while telling me to get a job if I wanted anything beyond food, Brianna never once offered to split the bill. She didn't have to. She knew the rules of the house. Janice gave her love, and in return, she stayed loyal. So when Brianna called me a decade later, I should have known better than to believe there'd been a real change. But hearing her voice again, it cracked something open. She sounded tired. Not in the way people do after a long day, but in the way people do when they've spent years trying to keep their heads above water. Part of me wanted to believe she'd grown up, that maybe she'd seen through Janice's manipulations at last. Maybe she was finally reaching out to make things right. I told myself I'd listen, gather the facts, and make an informed decision. That I wouldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. But that was a lie. Because even though I didn't realize it at the time, I was already unraveling. The moment I agreed to meet, I was already in too deep. We met at a cafe downtown. Neutral territory. I didn't give her my address, didn't ask for hers. When I walked in and saw her sitting by the window, my first thought was how much she looked like our mother now. Tight posture, forced smile, eyes that scanned the room like she was calculating every possible outcome. But there was something else too. Something rawer. A kind of quiet desperation humming beneath her skin. Caleb, she said, standing too quickly. Wow, you look older, I said, raising an eyebrow. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. No, just different. We ordered coffee and sat down, and she launched into the story like she'd been rehearsing it for weeks. Janice had lost her job 2 years ago. Something about downsizing at the insurance company where she worked. She tried to find something else, but her reputation wasn't great, and her spending habits hadn't changed. Credit cards maxed out. Medical bills piled up. She refinanced the house, twice, and defaulted on both. Then, when things got really bad, she started taking out loans in Brianna's name. That's when I leaned back and stared at her. She what? Brianna looked down at her coffee. It started with a department store card. I didn't even know about it until I got a collections notice in the mail. Then it was a line of credit for some furniture place. I confronted her, and she said she was just borrowing my name to help with family expenses. Said I owed her that much. I blinked slowly. And you let her? I didn't have a choice. Brianna snapped, then caught herself and lowered her voice. Sorry, I didn't mean to. She said if I didn't sign off on the car lease, we'd lose the house. And what? You believed her? I wanted to believe her, she whispered. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about Janice anymore. Brianna had become part of the machinery. She'd been swallowed whole. I saw pieces of myself in her, fragments of the kid who used to make excuses for why his mother never showed up to school events or forgot birthdays. It was easier to believe she meant well than to admit she didn't care. She's not going to change, I said carefully. You know that, right? Brianna's eyes met mine, and for a second, I thought she might cry. But then she just nodded and pulled a crumpled sheet of paper from her purse. This is everything she owes, she said. The house is 2 months away from auction. If we can just get ahead of a few payments. I held up a hand. Brianna paused. Caleb, I wouldn't ask if it weren't serious. She's still my mother. And yours. I stood up. That word echoed in my head like a gong. Mother. That woman hadn't earned the title in years. I'll think about it, I said, and left before she could respond. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling for hours, thinking about the weight of that folder in my hands. The numbers scribbled in her neat handwriting. The lie tucked inside every wee Brianna used. This wasn't a rescue mission. It was a setup. And deep down, I knew it wasn't over. The second call came 2 days later. This time, it was Janice. Caleb, she said, her voice syrupy and slow, like nothing had ever happened between us. Brianna said you might be able to help. It took every ounce of strength I had not to hang up. I'm not promising anything, I said, teeth clenched. Oh, of course. Just wanted to say how proud I am of you. Starting your own business and everything. That's just wonderful. I stared at the phone like it had grown horns. You haven't spoken to me in 10 years. Well, she said with a breathy little laugh. You know how things go. Families drift. But blood's thicker than water, isn't it? My stomach twisted. Not when it stains. Silence. Then she cleared her throat. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you. For even considering it. She hung up before I could reply. From that point on, the calls came more frequently. First Brianna, then Janice, then Brianna again. They started small, gentle check-ins, soft questions about my life. But gradually, the tone shifted. The pressure increased. They sent documents, photos, voicemails from debt collectors. Janice even faked a hospitalization to guilt-trip me into responding faster. I knew because the hospital bracelet still had her neighbor's name on it. But the breaking point? That came 3 weeks later. I was at work, finishing up a job for a long-time client, when I got a call from my bank. Mr. Keene, the woman said, we wanted to verify a recent application for a business loan increase. $40,000. I froze. I didn't apply for a loan. She paused. It was submitted this morning. Online. All your credentials match. I ended the call and drove straight to the branch. It took 30 minutes of panic, paperwork, and phone calls to realize what had happened. Someone had accessed my old tax documents, ones I'd left at home before I was kicked out. Social security number, business account info, even my signature from a previous lease. The banker leaned in and whispered, Do you know a Janice Keene? I couldn't breathe. They'd tried to rob me. After everything. After tossing me out like garbage, after a decade of silence, after calling me only when they were desperate, they had the nerve to forge my information to apply for a loan. That was the moment everything snapped. The pain, the guilt, the questions about whether I'd done enough, said enough, tried enough. Gone. All that was left was clarity. Janice hadn't changed. Brianna hadn't either. And I was done pretending they were victims in a story they authored themselves. So I picked up the phone, called Brianna, and with a calm, level voice, I said, "You're going to tell me everything. Every lie, every forged document, every collector you've dealt with, every threat Janice made. I want dates, names, account numbers." "Why?" she asked, voice shaking. "Because I'm going to fix this," I said. "But not the way you think." And just before I hung up, I added one last thing. "Oh, and tell Mom she should probably get a lawyer. Because now it was my turn. I wish I could tell you that after discovering the forged loan attempt, I charged into battle like some hero in a revenge flick. But the truth? I unraveled first. There's something uniquely disorienting about realizing your own mother tried to commit fraud in your name. After kicking you out at 18, after 10 years of silence, after pretending to want reconciliation. It wasn't just betrayal. It was surgical, calculated, and worse, it made me question everything I'd built. Was I ever really free of her, or had I just been outpacing the wreckage she left behind? I didn't eat that night, didn't sleep either. I sat in my apartment, lights off, letting the weight of it settle in. My mind kept spiraling, not just about the attempted loan, but about the look in Brianna's eyes when we met for coffee. That quiet desperation, the practiced guilt, the fact that she knew Janice had done this sort of thing before and still came to me like it was normal, like it was expected. I kept asking myself, how did I become the solution to the problem they created? The next morning, I went to work and stood in front of my shop, staring at the sign I'd carved with my own 2 hands when I finally scraped together enough money to go independent. Keen Diesel and Auto. My name. My legacy. Something no one gave me. Something I built because no one else would catch me if I fell. And yet, I felt hollow. The betrayal had opened an old wound I didn't realize still bled. The kid in me. The one who used to flinch at footsteps in the hallway or fight back tears while his sister got praised for a B-. He came roaring back. I felt like that kid again. Powerless. Small. For the next week, I moved through life on autopilot. I still showed up to work, nodded through customer interactions, barked orders at my crew, but I wasn't present. I'd get home and just collapse on the couch, staring at the ceiling like it owed me answers. The breaking point came when I snapped at one of my guys, Miguel, for asking a routine question about an engine rebuild. The look on his face was enough to gut me. "Dude," he said quietly, "you okay?" I wasn't. That night, I finally did something I'd avoided for a decade. I opened an old email account I hadn't touched since I was 18. I didn't even remember the password at first. Had to jump through 5 hoops just to get in. And there they were. Hundreds of unread emails. Scholarship offers. Community college reminders. Student loan approvals I never responded to. Notes from teachers checking in. Even an email from Mrs. Harper, my 11th grade English teacher, begging me to let her help after she heard what happened. I never read any of them. Never saw them. I'd left that email behind the day I left Janice's house, thinking there was no point holding on to anything from that part of my life. But seeing them now, it gutted me. Because maybe things could have been different. Maybe I'd spent 10 years clawing my way back up a hill I didn't even have to fall down. Maybe, if I'd had just one adult in my corner, I could have gone to school, traveled, done something beyond wrenches and oil changes. I broke down that night. Not the angry kind of crying. Not the loud, dramatic sobbing you see in movies. It was quiet. Like my body had finally stopped pretending everything was okay and just let go. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It's solid. And once you hit it, you finally have something to push off from. So that's what I did. I started small. Cleaned the apartment. Called my accountant to double-check that my business accounts were secure. I updated passwords, put fraud alerts on my credit, and flagged Janice's name with every agency I could. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was building a wall no one could scale. Then I called a therapist. It felt ridiculous at first. I sat in the parking lot of the clinic for 20 minutes before I could even walk in. But once I did, and once I started talking, I realized how much I'd been carrying that didn't belong to me. The shame, the guilt, the belief that I wasn't worth saving. None of that was mine. Janice gave it to me, and I'd been dragging it around like an anchor for 10 years. My therapist, her name was Carla, didn't try to fix me. She just listened. And slowly, I started seeing patterns I'd missed before. The way Janice had isolated me. The way she used silence as a weapon. The way she made me compete for love I never had a chance of winning. It wasn't healing in the Hollywood sense. There were no montage sequences, no dramatic music. Just slow, hard-earned clarity. And with that clarity came purpose. I doubled down on the business. Hired a second crew. Rebranded the shop with a new logo. Added a customer rewards program. Even bought a used food truck and parked it outside the shop for lunchtime traffic. Business boomed. I was working 12-hour days, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like running from something. It felt like building towards something. Around that time, I also started reconnecting with people I'd pushed away during the grind years. Old coworkers, a few high school friends, even Mrs. Harper. She still remembered me, still taught. When I told her what I was doing now, she smiled through the phone and said, "I always knew you'd land on your feet. You just had the wrong people in your corner." That stuck with me, because she was right. My whole life, I'd been told I was a burden, that I took up too much space, asked for too much, needed to be more like Brianna. But now I had employees who relied on me, clients who trusted me, a team who saw me as a leader. I wasn't just surviving. I was needed, respected. Still, the fallout from Janice's attempted fraud loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. I filed a police report, gave them everything, emails, texts, copies of the forged documents. Brianna begged me not to, said it would ruin their lives. That Janice was just desperate. I told her I knew the feeling. But that desperation didn't excuse betrayal. She went quiet after that, didn't call again for a few weeks. Until one night, she showed up at my shop, unannounced. It was late. I was alone. The bay doors were half shut, and I was cleaning up when I saw her standing outside, arms wrapped around herself like she was bracing for a storm. "Caleb," she said softly. I didn't know where else to go. I almost told her to leave, but something in her eyes stopped me. She looked like I had 10 years ago, lost, tired, cornered. She sat on an overturned bucket while I finished closing up, and then she told me everything. About the loans, the lies, the night Janice told her to call me. "I didn't want to," she said. "But she said if I didn't get money from you, she'd start calling your clients. Said she still had your old address book." I stared at her. "She threatened me?" Brianna nodded. I thought she was bluffing. But then I saw her draft an email pretending to be you. That's when I knew. She trailed off. I waited. Then she said it. That's when I knew she never loved either of us. Not really. It landed like a gut punch. Because even after everything, some small, stupid part of me still wanted to believe Janice had loved someone in our family. But maybe narcissism doesn't leave room for love. Just leverage. "I'm sorry," Brianna said, eyes brimming. For what I asked. For what I didn't stop. For everything. And I believed her. But belief doesn't undo damage. So I told her the truth. I filed charges. She closed her eyes, breathed out slowly. "Okay. I'm not doing it to destroy her," I added. "I'm doing it to stop her from destroying anyone else." Brianna nodded. "What do you need from me?" I paused. "Testify," I said finally. "Tell them what happened. Back up what I've already submitted." There was a long silence. Then, "Okay." She left that night with no promises, no hugs, no warm resolutions. Just an understanding that maybe, for once, we were on the same side. The next morning, I walked into my shop and felt something shift. The weight on my chest was lighter. My steps felt steadier. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop anymore. Because I wasn't the scared kid with a backpack and nowhere to go. I was the man who built something from the ashes. And now, it was time to return the favor. It's funny how revenge doesn't come in one big, dramatic swoop the way movies make it seem. It's quieter than that. Slower. More precise. Like tightening a series of screws until the whole thing creaks under the pressure and collapses with the slightest touch. I didn't plan on seeking revenge at first. I just wanted peace. A clean break. But once I filed that police report and started getting into the details of the loan application Janice tried to file in my name, it became clear she hadn't just tried to take from me. She was still taking. From Brianna. From distant family members. Even from an elderly neighbor she had convinced to co-sign for a furniture loan last year. She was a walking disaster disguised as a victim, and the more I dug, the more I saw how deep the rot went. And I couldn't ignore it anymore. Janice had to be stopped. Not just legally. Not just with court dates and depositions. She had to feel it. Understand what it's like to watch something you built unravel. Slowly, helplessly, while the people you underestimated pull the strings. But for that, I needed leverage. Real leverage. And lucky for me, She'd already given me all the rope I needed to hang her with. The first thing I did was go back to the bank. Not just the branch that flagged the attempted loan, but every institution she might have contacted. I requested full fraud investigation reports, subpoenaed through my lawyer when necessary. At first, it was like moving through wet cement, slow and exhausting. But once the first few documents came through, it snowballed. Turns out Janice had tried applying for 3 different loans using my information. Only one flagged it. The others? Still pending review. I froze every account I had, then opened new ones under a business trust one created with a different name. I hired a cybersecurity consultant to comb through my personal data, and sure enough, she'd been scraping old records, probably from a storage bin in her garage or a junk drawer she never cleaned out. But what really pushed things over the edge? Brianna started talking. At first, it was tentative, quiet. She'd send me texts at odd hours with little details. A receipt from a loan, a credit card bill in someone else's name, a scanned image of Janice's notebook where she scribbled passwords and account numbers. But then something changed. I think Brianna finally realized that Janice was never going to protect her, that she was just another pawn in a long game of deflection and manipulation. And when she made that mental break, she gave me everything. Years' worth of evidence. Copies of tax returns Janice had forged using her identity. Screenshots of emails where Janice instructed her to convince Caleb to help and offered to split the payoff if he plays ball. There was even a recording, muffled but clear, of Janice admitting to opening accounts in both our names and bragging about how stupid we were for leaving that kind of information in her hands. "I'll never have to work again," she'd said in the recording, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Caleb's doing great. He owes me for raising him. I'm just collecting interest." That was the final nail in the coffin. I forwarded it to my lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Ava who used to work white-collar crime in Chicago. When I played the recording for her in her office, she didn't even blink. "She's done," Ava said. "I'll prepare the fraud case. But if you really want to bury her, we should go after her civilly, too." "You mean sue her?" "I mean destroy her," Ava replied. And that's when I stopped feeling like a victim. I felt like an architect. Step 1 was control. I needed to make sure Janice didn't see it coming. So I played it cool. No more calls. No angry texts. No confrontation. I vanished from her radar again. This time, intentionally. Let her believe I gave up, or got scared off, or decided I wasn't worth the hassle. People like her thrive on attention. Silence makes them nervous. Meanwhile, Ava and I began building a case. I wasn't just filing charges for the attempted loan in my name. We were filing for identity theft, defamation, attempted wire fraud, and financial elder abuse, because one of the names she'd borrowed credit from belonged to her old neighbor, Mr. Donovan, a 78-year-old who thought he was co-signing a medical bill. When we contacted him, he broke down crying. She said it was for a back surgery, he told us over the phone. Said she'd pay me back in a month. He never saw a dime. Once we had Mr. Donovan's statement, we started tracking down other victims. Most didn't even realize they were victims. A cousin from Michigan who got hit with a tax lien. A distant aunt whose credit score mysteriously dropped 200 points. A former coworker who found her name on a payday loan she never applied for. Janice wasn't just reckless. She was systematic. She used people the way some people use coupons. Take what you want, throw away the rest. And somehow, she'd gotten away with it for years. Not anymore. The next step was laying traps. Ava helped me draft a formal letter, posing as a debt reconciliation specialist, offering Janice an off-the-record solution for her debts. One that involved a phone call, a signed agreement, and a verbal confirmation of all loans taken in my name and others. We had Brianna deliver it under the guise of a friend's referral. Janice bought it in 2 days. She called the number listed, Ava's private investigator, who posed as the specialist, and volunteered everything. Admitted to opening the loan applications. Admitted to signing Brianna's name. Claimed she was entitled to a little support from her kids and that it was family money anyway. She laughed. Laughed about how she was going to get out of this mess because Caleb can't afford to take me down without wrecking the whole family name. We recorded the entire thing, and then we subpoenaed her phone records. Turns out she had been calling my clients. Well, trying to. Left a few voicemails at old numbers claiming I was under investigation and not to be trusted. Most of them just blocked the number. But the intent was there. It was enough to tack on a defamation charge. I was methodical, cold, patient. Everything Janice wasn't. And while the legal side of things moved forward, I made another move, this one personal. I sat down with Brianna and had the most honest conversation we'd ever had in our lives. I need to know, I said. Why now? Why really come to me? She didn't answer at first. Just sat there, playing with the edge of her sleeve like she used to when we were kids. Then she said, because I realized she would have thrown me away just like she threw you away. And when I saw what she tried to do to you, it finally clicked. You weren't the broken one, Caleb. You were the only one who ever saw her clearly. I didn't say anything, just nodded. And if I have to testify, she added, I will. I don't care if she never speaks to me again. She won't, I said quietly. I know, Brianna replied. And that's the point. We started seeing each other more after that. Not often, but enough. She came by the shop, helped me organize some paperwork, told me stories about her job, her roommate, the little steps she was taking to reclaim her life. It wasn't some instant sibling reunion. We were still cautious around each other, still scarred. But for the first time, I didn't feel alone in the war. I had an ally. And then came the opportunity I'd been waiting for. A charity gala. Janice loved galas. Loved being seen in expensive dresses, pretending she belonged with people who actually paid their debts. She'd finessed an invite through one of her old insurance buddies. Brianna found out and forwarded me the details. So I called Ava. You thinking what I'm thinking? I asked. Oh, I hope so, she said. We arranged for a process server to deliver Janice the lawsuit documents at the gala, in front of 100 people she'd spent years trying to impress. Defamation, fraud, identity theft, financial elder abuse, and a civil claim for damages. And the best part? We timed it to the exact moment the cameras went up for the red carpet photos. That was just the beginning. She didn't even see the server coming. Janice was mid-laugh, posing for a photo at the gala in a borrowed cocktail dress, champagne flute in hand, talking someone's ear off about strategic investments and her son's successful business, a business she hadn't contributed a dime toward. She always had this way of making herself sound like the matriarch of an empire she never built. That night, she looked like she belonged, like she'd tricked the world one more time. Then the man in the black suit walked up with a clipboard and a sealed envelope. Janice Keene. She smiled automatically, still camera ready. That's me. You've been served. At first, she didn't register it. Just took the envelope as though it were a donation receipt. Then her smile faltered. Her eyes scanned the first page. Then the second. Fraud. Wire fraud. Identity theft. Financial elder abuse. Defamation. Civil damages. The envelope slipped from her hand, floated to the ground like a falling leaf. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen in front of a dozen flashing cameras, unsure whether to pretend nothing happened or run. She chose the former, smiling through it, head high, eyes twitching. But the whispers started almost immediately. By the time she stepped off the red carpet, people were already checking their phones. The court documents had been filed that morning, and Ava made sure the local media received a tip-off. A high-profile identity fraud case involving a woman who had conned half her family? It didn't take much to get traction. Within 24 hours, her name was all over local news sites. Socialite mom accused of defrauding children, elderly neighbor in scheme worth tens of thousands. The fallout was fast and vicious. Her landlord gave her 30 days notice. Her bank accounts, what little remained, were frozen. Her old employer, who she occasionally freelanced for, released a statement cutting all ties. Friends stopped replying to her texts. Neighbors stared a little longer when she checked her mail. A few people she owed money to came knocking, emboldened now that her mask had cracked. And then came the official court summons. Ava pushed for prosecution, but the DA was already on it. Mr. Donovan's statement, the recordings, the paper trail, it was a slam dunk. Janice was charged with multiple counts, and bail was set far higher than she could afford. When they finally arrested her, it wasn't in the middle of the night. It was mid-morning, at a nail salon, in public. I wasn't there for it. Didn't need to be. Brianna was. She watched from her car as they placed Janice in cuffs, calmly sipping a gas station coffee, like she was watching the weather. I didn't cry, she told me later. I didn't feel anything. Isn't that weird? No, I said. That's clarity. The trial was quick. Janice's public defender tried to plead bargain, but the DA wasn't interested in leniency. Especially not after they discovered she had multiple social security numbers stored in a file on her laptop. numbers tied to extended family members, past coworkers, even 2 deceased individuals. Her house was seized. Her assets were liquidated. Every lie she'd told over the past decade caught up to her in a single tidal wave. Brianna testified, calm and composed. She brought documents, emails, the notebook. I testified too, not out of spite, out of duty. It wasn't about payback anymore. It was about making sure she couldn't do this again. Not to me, not to anyone. The judge didn't hold back. Janice was sentenced to 7 years in prison with no possibility of parole for the first 3. The civil suit went through shortly after. She was ordered to pay restitution to me, Brianna, Mr. Donovan, and 3 other people we didn't even know she'd targeted. In total, it came out to over $185,000. Money she'd never be able to pay back. But that wasn't the point. The point was, she was done. She wouldn't ruin anyone else. She wouldn't use my name again. She wouldn't make another person feel like they were crazy for asking to be treated with respect. For the first time in my life, I felt clean, like the weight had finally lifted. Not because she was gone, but because I made it happen. And as for Brianna, she started fresh, moved into a new place across town, changed her number, went back to school part-time for accounting, of all things. She still works part-time at a bookstore and sends me photos of weird customers and badly designed book covers. We talk more now. Not daily, but enough. The day Janice was sentenced, we sat in a diner after court. Just the 2 of us. No champagne, no speeches. Just pancakes and silence. Then Brianna looked up and said, "Do you think she ever loved us?" I thought about it. Maybe in her own way, I said. But I don't think she knew what love actually meant. Brianna nodded, eyes glossy. Well, I think I do now. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It wasn't some Hallmark ending. We didn't magically become the perfect siblings. There are still wounds. Still moments when the silence creeps in and whispers old doubts. But we're building something new. Brick by brick. Conversation by conversation. As for me, Keen Diesel and Auto expanded again. I bought the space next door and turned it into a waiting lounge with free Wi-Fi and coffee. I even hired a receptionist, Maria, who tells me every day that I need to take a vacation. Maybe I will. For once, there's nothing chasing me. And Janice? She's where she belongs. Behind cold steel and concrete, where charm and manipulation don't count for much. She sends letters sometimes. Long, rambling things full of apologies and excuses and Bible verses. I don't read them. I donate them to a recycling bin outside the post office. And every time I let one fall through the slot, I walk away a little lighter. Because I've already served my time. Now it's her turn. And that's the thing about being thrown out with nothing but a backpack. You learn how to travel light. You learn how to survive. And one day, you learn how to win.
You're good? Did you get up too much today? People get busy sometimes. I know, I'm just worried about him. Hi, Coffee Bean. I'm just worried about him. That's all. I don't mean it in a way of like, oh, I'm sad that Billy's not here. Like I am, but I'm more